when we partner with a diverse group of industry and beyond just the rural sector. When we brought that diverse group together, not only did we tick off what the project needed to do, but the learnings that we took out of that and how that shaped our research beyond Southland is enormous.
Well, welcome everyone to episode 5 of the Heartland Strong podcast, based on the book Heartland Strong, How Rural New Zealand Can Change and Thrive. Today we've got 2 guests. We've got Robin Dines and Ronaldo Vibart, and they're both with Ag Research and both farm systems scientists. And they were both involved in the work down in Southland, exploring resilience in Southland. So we're starting with Robin, and we're going to find out a bit more about what Robin does, and then we're going to dig into the work that she was involved in Southland. So Robin, welcome along.
Thank you, Denise.
Tell us a bit about your background. What do you do?
Thanks, Denise. Well, I'm a farm systems scientist based with Ag Research at Lincoln. My background is in animal nutrition, but as your science career evolves, I've had the opportunity to move into the farm systems space, which I think is my real place.
Definitely.
And that's my passion, because it's about where the soils, the plants, the animals, and the business come together. And at the centre of that business is the farmer. Yeah. So that's the role that I work in. And what took me to Southland, well, was the opportunity to work down there, which I jumped at. Now, I was born in Southland, which helps, because they all can connect you, as you will appreciate. And of course, there were other attractions to Southland, like Southland sushi.
You introduced me to Southland sushi, and it's yum.
I know. There's nothing like a Southland cheese roll. They are never as good as in Southland, are they?
I have to agree, absolutely.
Exactly.
And you introduced me to the ones where you don't just slice the bread normally, but you slice it long ways, so you get the extra long roll.
White bread, the ultimate cheese roll, yes.
It's got to be good. Oh. Anyway, food is important, but yeah, Southland. Why Southland for the project?
Why Southland? Well, look, we need to look back to when the project was undertaken, and Southland was an obvious choice. We had a great link into the people in Southland, particularly around Venture Southland, and more so, it's a region that was undergoing change. So it's a region that over the last 25 years has seen a massive change in land use. So we had a great team of people to work with, and it was a region undergoing change. So those two things made it a great place to work.
Yeah. And there was a whole range of community people who were part of that. So can you tell us more about those different perspectives that were part of the project?
Yes, there were indeed. So, with the help of the people on the ground in Southland, we ended up with a community group that we met with 4 times. And they represented the livestock sector, both dairy, sheep, beef and deer. They represented the arable sector in Southland, forestry, tourism, policy. We had a deputy mayor. So we had this real diversity of people in the room. Mm-hmm. And that richness and that diversity and the lens that they were viewing things from, town planning to a water policy setting to farmers. And to farmers who'd been farming in the region, and it's an intergenerational farming region, as well as the new farmers who'd come in as part of the dairy conversion. So what a rich group we had.
Absolutely. And just having all of those different perspectives makes the project more interesting, probably a bit challenging at times as well, with those different perspectives. But that's where the modelling work really came into its own, to start have those discussions with that range of perspectives. Tell us a bit about that.
Yes, look, that's right, Denise. So the workshops were based very much around the people and their views. And it's interesting, isn't it, when you're in a place like Southland, there is a shared belief that we're all about this being a great place to have a business, to farm, to work, to live. What we did with the modelling, with the multi-agent simulation model, which Ronaldo is going to talk more about, was we were able to use that model, and it's a model that has these layers. So, for example, every legal land parcel in Southland was represented in the model. So there are layers about the land parcels. There are layers about the type of farms using FarmMax modelling that could or do operate on those. Then there are economic layers, and then there are layers about people and how people make decisions. And that's the unique feature of a multi-agent simulation. It does not assume everybody makes a decision from an economically rational perspective. It recognises we all bring a range of values to our decision making. So the strength of using the model was we were asking people to envisage a future and to envisage what their region might look like. And so as they talked about land use change, we were able to put it into the model, and Bill K. Blake was key to that, and I think you've already heard from Bill in the podcasts, and then say, so with these sets of values, here's how your region might look. And because we could do that on the fly, people could say, yes, no, oh, that's amazing, or we don't think that would happen, and here's why we don't think it would happen. So they were bringing that degree of objectivity, so they could say, yes, but what if red meat prices went up 100%? We wouldn't see a conversion to dairying. So we could put that up and then show what the region might look like, and then say, now, why do you think that might happen? Yeah. But it was two-way, because we learnt a lot. And we learnt a lot because the first time we put it up, they said, well, your model's wrong.
Love it.
Your model's wrong because there are not that many dairy farms in Southland, and your numbers are not too far wrong, but in reality, they didn't convert that quickly. So we were able to then seek to understand what their views were, and then in fact recalibrate the model based on the data from Southland. And in that case, it was understanding anyone making a major land use change doesn't make it like that. Yeah. There's a measured time, there's, if you like, a latency to their decision making. So there's these external forces, and that could be the children have decided to come home to the farm or not. It could be relativity in the commodity values, opportunity for more value, stage of life. But there's a measured approach to it that takes a degree of time. And we learnt so much from the Southlanders through that exercise. Yeah.
And I guess they had the opportunity to explore some options that weren't locking them into anything either through the modelling. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's kind of like we joke about, explore planting a tree without needing a spade and digging a hole. But in this case, it was also exploring at an industry and a regional level. And you immediately see with people in regions, they immediately start to talk about the impact for our region. What if we got that? What would that mean? So I'm always impressed by the rural sectors and how they are focused on their communities.
Yeah. So what do you think some of the implications of what you found out are for policy, and particularly in light of things like freshwater policy and things like that? What would you say?
Right. Well, I think the first thing we need to understand is that rural businesses, like all of us, have a range of values that they use to drive their decision making. And we did use the RF-MAS model to explore water policy. And what we looked at there was said that farmers needing to drive towards freshwater standards, for example, some farmers will be more risk averse than others. Some will be more willing to invest and more able to invest than others. So the team led by Bill then put together clusters where there was a cluster that would make less investment versus a cluster that would make more investment. And if farmers clustered differently, then the model was able to estimate what that would mean for the region.
Nice.
And so you could then start to explore, well, how would you get people to shift from a lower investing and lower beneficial to a higher investing? So able to do that, I think, gives a really interesting perspective for policy. And the reality was RF-MAS was always developed because we saw its strength in assisting thinking about policy, thinking about intended and unintended consequences.
Yes, which often happens with policy. Oh, this is a good idea. Oops.
Guess what the people did? Yes, exactly.
Yeah, fair enough. So in terms of the work that you did and thinking about farming practices, how are you thinking? Are they resilient? Are they vulnerable to the changing environment that they're sitting in? What do you think?
Look, I think New Zealand farming has shown itself to be extremely resilient.
Yeah.
And resilience, I think, in each business does look different. It's fair to say that the challenges that our farming businesses are facing now with multiple drivers, not just freshwater, are really challenging the industries that support the farmers, the rural professionals that support them, as well as the farmers. I think if we look back to the 1980s, where we really did see the resilience of farming tested, it showed us how farming could respond.
Yeah.
And, we saw the changes, perhaps in the red meat sector, where we saw, the number of lambs weaned per ewe go from 1 lamb per ewe to 1.24. It felt like almost overnight. So our farmers do farm in a free market economy. They make decisions based on the fact they're in a free market economy. This is a new paradigm with the amount of regulation. So what I'm impressed by is how farmers and the industry are looking to upskill themselves, being involved in things like the Red Meat Profit Partnership, the kind of work that Dairy NZ and the catchment groups are doing is all about building awareness, building knowledge, getting confidence about what my options are for my business. Yeah. And so I am optimistic that farming will find a way. I think all of these things do come at a cost. Yeah. And the costs that they come at are different with different businesses, from human costs, social costs, economic costs. How do we balance all of those out are the challenges that Southland faces, That's more so than many.
Yes, that's right. And it'll look different. That balance will look different in different regions. Yeah.
Look at Welland, and I think Southland, like many of our rural regions, is really struggling around having sufficient people as well. That's people on the farms, in the businesses, and in the support structures. Yeah. There are great people, and how do they keep having sufficient people as the support they need grows? Yeah.
No, that's fair. Wrapping it up, Robin, what would you tell others thinking about working in this area, just from what you've learnt?
Well, look, Southland, firstly, is a great place to work.
Absolutely.
The cheese rolls are fabulous. More importantly, for science, the way we're doing our science is changing a lot, and this is a great example. Yep. And this is an example of the richness of the learning that science has, how we can identify what the real questions are when we partner with a diverse group of industry and beyond just the rural sector. When we brought that diverse group together, not only did we tick off what the project needed to do, but the learnings that we took out of that and how that shaped our research beyond Southland is enormous. And for that, we're always grateful, because those people all gave their time to us, their enthusiasm, their knowledge and their learning. And that's huge for us. So great place to work. And we, of course, always learn more, and perhaps we impart when we go into those kind of case studies.
Excellent. So worth a read in the book, and finding out more details if this has whet your appetite, I'd say, Robin.
Today we are talking resilience in Southland with Ronaldo Vibart from Ag Research. Ronaldo is a farm system scientist at Ag Research. Ronaldo, welcome along. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and how you're involved in the resilience work?
Hello, Denise. Thank you for that kind introduction. I'm originally from Argentina, so you'll find a little bit of a weird accent there. But my kind of joining the resilience team here at Grasslands and working in the Southland chapter has to do with my background as an agronomist, and then kind of turned into an animal nutritionist, and then into farm systems. So trying to go from the component type research to more of a holistic farm systems, wider approach to research.
Really cool. And because I think all the different members of the Heartland Strong team have brought their different backgrounds and experience to the program and to the project. So it's really cool to hear. So tell us a bit about the agent-based multi-simulation model. I don't think I'm getting the based simulation model that was used in Southland. Can you give us a bit of background and what you were doing for that, Ronaldo?
So we call it the RFMS, the Rural Futures Multi-Agent Simulation Model. A little bit of a mouthful there, but what the model basically is it has kind of a geolocation or GIS type where you can kind of see where the farms are. Then it has a second layer of farm description. You can see where the sheep and beef and dairy and other activities happen, and a little bit of a description of what these farm systems are. And then there's a third layer that has to do with the social aspects of how the probabilities of adoption of changes if needed. The model, what it does is it's a little bit of a beast. It allows you to do some real-time exploration and put things on the table and be able to have a discussion around them.
That's really cool. So, Ronaldo, you were contributing to particular layers of the model or parts of that model?
Basically, we used kind of an agri-based layer, the GIS, the location, the land use capability classes, the carrying capacity of these farms. And the part that I was involved with is in the description of these farm systems. So particularly for Southland, we looked at mid-intensity dairy farm systems and sort of the equivalent to a system 3 from Dairy NZ and a system 4, which is kind of slightly above average. And then a similar thing for sheep and beef systems. We looked at kind of a breeding finishing representative system from Southland and went from there.
Cool. And so what stood out to you as you started to do that and you pulled some different scenarios together? What was standing out?
It was very interesting because at the time of the modeling, it was, and continues to be, kind of nitrogen leaching losses to freshwater bodies. So that continues to be the concern nationwide. And it was kind of encouragement from Environment Southland and MFE and MPI to look at this tool to see what could be done in terms of trying to mitigate some of those nitrogen losses to freshwater bodies. And then we looked also, we looked at phosphorus losses and greenhouse gas emissions too. What came out of it was that there were clearly differences in depending on the approach that you would go for in terms of kind of thresholds and results that you wanted to obtain from the model. In terms of costs, in terms of the changes needed, what was the probability of these changes being adopted, those kind of things.
Excellent. So how do you think the modelling contributed to thinking in Southland and the group that you were working with?
Look, it was a wonderful. It allowed us to while we were having these workshops down there, and I'm sure Robin touched upon some of those. What it allowed the group, at least from our end, was to have these discussions and look at what basically we were not too concerned about the absolute numbers, but the trends. If we look into the future, what does a basic tidy up of things look like? If you're going to go to a second tier or a bundle where you're putting more money into it and it's kind of harder to adopt, and even a third one where the investment is quite sizable and much harder to adopt as expected. So ease of adoption and mitigation potential, that setting those bundling packages was kind of the challenge, and we got a lot of feedback from those workshops to what to include in these bundles of mitigation.
And so how are you feeling about where the modelling ended up? And do you feel like it was something that could be used elsewhere, or you needed a bit more feedback to help the model keep working in Southland?
Absolutely. I mean, it's in working. It's a work in progress. We'll put it that way. I mean, as most of these things, the very cool thing about it was that at the time, Bill K. Blake had done a little bit of a validation of the model and looked, instead of looking forward, So the model basically allows you to look at, we said a 25-year period looking into the future. But what he did was he and his team back then, they looked at what would if we model backwards, model the past, are we in the right direction? And basically, it gives you a little bit of a sense of validation or verification that things are working. And that was a very good experience, and it worked. But also at the time, there was George Ledgard from Environment Southland had published similar work, but without using the RF mass model. He went kind of region-wide looking at what different mitigations would look like and what would they cost and kind of the ease of adoption. And we came up with quite similar results. Although we went with very different approaches, we came up with so it just gave us a little bit of a backing up. And of course, the model needs updating. Then when you take it to a different region, you're talking about different farm systems. The whole GIS layer, the bottom layer, if you will be very different. And the possibilities of bundling mitigation packages is very much tailored to what the problem is in the region.
Yeah, but it sounds like it could very much be used for policy development in different areas if you've got the team to work on all of those parts and bring it together.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it was a fascinating piece of work, and very interesting that we had a few people that were kind of keeping us grounded, that we were not kind of, this looks like technology in 50 years time or something that no, we've gone way beyond that. So we, Ross Monahan and others back down in Southland were keeping us grounded with decisions made and the thresholds that, or the potential thresholds that we could actually mitigate. So there was, it was a very nice experience putting it on the table and having these research / as you put it, policy discussions. Absolutely.
So, Ronaldo, your sense of the farming practices from doing this modelling in Southland, how resilient are they doing, from being involved in this project and from your point of view? Tell us how you...
Look, I've always been fascinated by the resilience of the farming community, not only farmers, but the whole support from the community, but also supporting communities such as contractors and services supplied, and it's a whole package of logistics happening at the communal level that has been resilient for centuries. I guess what we're trying to do as new or novel is just trying to quantify some of these nutrient losses and trying to address, well, if we go with these slight adjustments, this is what we gain. And it was fascinating to see that some of those adjustments were actually increasing profitability. So you'd think that anything that you do to address nutrient losses and greenhouse gas emissions is going to go against your pocket, but that wasn't necessarily the case. So it was really fascinating.
Anything else that we haven't talked about that you did just want to mention before we finish up?
Look, it was a very nice experience. It was lovely to be part of a large interdisciplinary. We talk about interdisciplinarity. I can't even pronounce the word. It's a big word, but we talk about that all the time. But this was that in action. You could see the soil scientists talking to the social scientists, to people that are more farm systems or GIS specialists. It was the broader scientific / policy community working in action. You could see that kind of around the table. So I thought that was fascinating.
Really cool. It's great when a project generates that much excitement and challenge and interest. So yeah, thank you so much for your time, Ronaldo. It's great. You need to read the Heartland Strong book, a book about how rural New Zealand can change and thrive. And if you want more details, there's a section in there that Ronaldo authored looking at this use of modelling in Southland. So thank you again for your time, Ronaldo.